This part turned out to be one of the hardest portions of this installation entirely, so feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter or to the end of this chapter to see how I solved this specific problem. You're about to see me struggling all kinds of ways. First, I thought I put the support bracket on backwards, so I flipped it back and forth. Then I realized I installed it correctly the first time, so I swapped it back. Then I realized that the complete unit assembly that I received, you're looking at it now, this is actually as expected. Not as expected, but it's not rare that they arrive crooked like this with a shock not easily insertable, but you're supposed to put in a screwdriver, and you're also supposed to disconnect other suspension components at will in order to successfully actually manage to get it into this knuckle. This step is not easy. This was complex on both sides of the car, and this was definitely not enjoyable. The spring's the same way as the old shock assembly. At the bottom, it's actually angled the other way. This stage is a lot of getting under the car with pretty decent eye protection. Here's me removing it and then flipping the support because I thought I installed it backwards. But that way it fit even worse. So aligning based on the rubber pads for the spring was actually the correct way to go. I'm calling it a night because now it's not fitting at all. I'm tired. With renewed spirits the next morning, we installed the upper mount the original way as we installed it the first time around. So the solution is this one also isn't perfect. It's not angled the right way. And flipping it around 180 totally messes up the position. So this was right. The bed is down. The shock is movable, so we move it with a screwdriver, which is kind of sort of what we did with the front strut, but this is different for the rear. And we're gonna jack it up while applying pressure with a long lever here. I don't like it that you have to do this with this pre-installed kit, but if you do get the linked kit, be aware that this is something you will have to do. I do not know if you have to do this on all new kits. So we're torquing the top back to 44 foot-pounds. Then we're gonna twist it with a screwdriver with a jack underneath to insert into this fork because this fork is a little cozy. But luckily this ribbed. Also taking a pause here, you can have one man stand on the rotor, open the rear door and actually put a foot and stand on the rotor with other suspension components disconnected to give you the clearance you might need to fit this fork over the shock. This is what added to the complexity of this step significantly. I did not film disconnecting the other suspension components on both sides, but I disconnected as indicated in the Pelican image above the bottom fork on one side, and I forget which other suspension component on the other side to actually give us the clearance we needed. Because even with one man standing on the rotor on either side, we did not get enough clearance and could not apply enough pressure to get the fork over the shock. So it wiggled down a few centimeters, but not completely. You're going to see me try to jack the shock into the fork from below, but actually stepping on the rotor gives you the clearance and the flexibility you need to get the fork over the shock. So after some wrestling, if it still doesn't want to go in and doesn't compress how you want it while you're bending it, gets stuck on the shock itself, which is bad. So we were careful about not applying too much pressure, even though we scratched the paint. Then per the Pelican guide, if we observe, we can actually move this a little down, the wheel hub assembly. We can disconnect the upper and lower control arms. So we're gonna PB blast those and disconnect them. I only had to disconnect the lower one, and alas, I did it from the wrong side. You want to do the bolts closer to the wheel hub, not from the car side. And that should give us enough travel to pull the wheel hub down onto the shock while twisting it to get it in. Upper control link and lower control link. As you watch this time lapse, you're going to see, well, once I get the bolts off, that you can actually, there's increased travel on this entire assembly. So it's, at least to me, it's pretty exciting. We can actually get this over the shock.